Good afternoon, everyone. I am Janabal Gasatan, and today I am going to discuss about Lesson 6 entitled Contemporary Global Governance. So, lesson objectives. After this lesson, you should be able to understand the concept of global governance, understand the role of the state amidst globalizations, determine the challenges of global governance in the 21st century, and identify the rules and functions of the United Nations. The definition of terms. So, global governance, when we say global governance, it is the collective efforts to identify, understand, and address worldwide problems that go beyond the problem solving capacities of the states. So, global governance is the capacity within the international system at any given moment to provide government-like services and public goods in the absence of a world government. It is the combination of informal and formal ideas, values, rules, norms, procedures, practices, policies, and organizations that help all sectors, states, IGOs, civil society, and NGOs, TMC, and identify, understand, and address transboundary problems. So, as its simplest, global governance is a set of questions that enable us to work out how the world is, was, and could be governed, and how changes in grand and not so grand patterns of governance occurred, are occurring, and ought to occur. So, global governance or world governance is a movement towards political cooperation among transnational actors aimed at negotiating responses to problems that affect more than one state or region. So, institution of global governance, the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, the World Bank, etc., tend to have limited or demarcated power to enforce compliance. Today, a gross disconnect is apparent between the nature of a growing number of contested global problems. So, example of these global problems are climate change, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, mass atrocities, financial volatilities, cyber threats, transnational crime, and pandemics. So this pandemics is very present nowadays, especially we are experiencing the coronavirus disease. So, and the political structures for international problem solving and decision making. This is because of the traditional and age-old political structures which have been in existence for centuries. Next is the uncertainty of the sovereign of the territorial state of nation state. So since the end of the Cold War, the world is heading toward a less centralized form of governance. As the United States is facing serious setbacks in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, many emerging powers such as China, Russia, and Brazil have formed regional alliances to create a multipolar and anti-hegemonic order. This development is being referred to as the beginning of the post-American world, in which the United States retreats and the rest of the world advances in economic power and political influence. Zechariah 2008. This is in stark contrast to the kind of political entity which determined our lives. So, the sovereign territorial state or nation state, in fact, most Western countries have lived under this kind of the state since the late 18th century or possible earlier. This kind of state has become the universal framework of social development. However, after centuries of serving as an example of most, if not all sovereign countries, this kind of state is entering a phase of uncertainty. As a review, the notion of nation state has the following elements. So there are seven elements of notion of nation state. So A, continuous and broken territory. B, sovereign territory. So when we say sovereign territory, it is international law defines sovereign state as having a permanent population, defined territory, one government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other sovereign states. It is also normally understood that a sovereign state is independent. C, the state has the monopoly both of law and the powers of coercion. D, the national state rules its citizens or subjects directly and not through intermediate authorities. E, direct government and administration of inhabitants by the central authorities of the nation-state. And F, the state is considered to represent the people and the people serves as a source of sovereignty or at least give the state legitimacy. And the last but not the least is the citizenry was or ought to form a homogeneous population. However, the rigidity interposed by this age-old kind of setup has been disregarded several times in worldwide events. So, disintegration of the Soviet Union, rise of transnational entities within states, global problems requiring global actions. Nowadays, the state power and functions have been undermined by supranational and infranational forces, as well as what can be described as the withdrawal of its inhabitants from citizenship. These supranational forces have weakened the state in three ways. So, this is the three ways that weaken the state. So, number one, the creation of a supranational economy wherein the transactions are largely uncontrolled by states, resulting to the restrictions of states to direct national economies. Number two, rise of regional or global institutions, such as European Union, ASEAN, UN, to which individuals differ either because they are too small to engage in effective competition, international competition, or because their economies are so weak. Number three, territorial borders had been made largely irrelevant by technological revolution in transport and communities. Next is the rise of non-state actors. So, a huge rise of non-state actors resulted from the occurrence above mentioned. These international organizations in the public and private sectors are set with higher objectives and goals to participate in global governance and improving lives. This rise also created a new landscape and new architectures of global governance wherein multi-sector partnerships are present such as transnational businesses. So, in addition, the success of non-state actors does not mean that intergovernmental organizations have no role, quite the contrary. The diversity of actors has created opportunities for new partnerships to form and older ones to be strengthened. But states and their intergovernmental organizations remain an essential component of future global governance. Their strengths and unique capabilities should not be short-changed in our enthusiasm for non-state actors. Further, the loose structures of these organizations allow more efficient courses of action than the bureaucracies of nation or states can attain. The growth of non-state actors has meant more diversity in potential players and partners. The proliferation of actors that are legitimately representing stakeholders and contributing concretely to contemporary global problem-solving means that we have come a long way from the state-centric model of traditional international relations. The proliferation of non-state actors has ushered in an age of global partnerships between private and public bodies on specific issues. So, next topic is the United Nations. So, one important example of a non-state and international government organization IGO playing a vital role in the world's affairs is the United Nations or UN. The United Nations is an IGO or international government organization designed to make the enforcement of international law, security, human rights, economic development, and social progress easier for countries around the world. So that is how important the UN is. So the UN today is divided into 5 branches. So number 1 is the UN General Assembly. So it is the main decision-making and representative assembly and is responsible for upholding the principle of the UN through its policies and recommendations. So it is composed of all member states and headed by a president elected by the member states. So number 2, the UN Security Council. So can authorize the development of the UN member states' militaries. So can mandate a ceasefire during conflicts and can enforce penalties on countries. If they do not comply with given mandates, it is composed of 5 permanent members and 10 rotating members. Now, number 3 branch, the International Court of Justice can settle according to international law, legal disputes between states and give opinions, mostly advisory, on legal questions brought to it by UN organs and agencies. So number 4 branch, the Economic and Social Council assists the UN General Assembly in promoting economic and social development as well as cooperation of member states. So number 5, the last branch, the Secretariat. So headed by the Secretary General, provides studies, information, and other dates when needed by other UN branches for their meetings. So the next one is the G20 Plus and a new framework for global cooperation. So as we treated above, in a globally integrated world economy, the need for global collective action and stability is almost universally recognized. So the proposed new framework for global economic cooperation with a competent and accountable coordination body, the G20 Plus, and connected to a representative global system or UN. So it aims to preserve global economic stability and to ensure that the global economy continues to grow inclusively to benefit all nations and peoples equitably. So the core functions, its structures, membership, and ties to the UN of the G20 Plus within the wider new framework for global economic cooperation includes the following integral functions. So these are the integral functions. So facilitate multi-stakeholder, cross-disciplinary dialogue and policy solutions. Number 2, promote inclusive policy reform. And number 3, enable global economic crisis response. So overall, the summary of the topic, contemporary global governance, is the capacity within the international system at any given moment to provide government-like services and public goods in the absence of a world government. So this kind of governance shifted from the traditional territorial sovereign state or nation state. So to a more loose and less strict structures warranting international cooperation, movement, and response. So in response, several non-state bodies came about, including the United Nations and the G20 Plus, all with ultimate goals of international action. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you and God bless.